I was working an acting job. It was a good job with regular hours and the checks were clearing. And I just finally one day went out to Van Nuys. I just signed up for their Discovery flight. So they gave me my little certificate and stuff. But then I talked to my instructor afterwards and I was like, no, I really want to do this.
You did a good job selling me.
Yeah, this was all very cute, but I really want to do it.
Aviators, welcome to the Flight Club podcast. I'm your host, Jason Middleton. I'm a pilot, I'm an aviation entrepreneur, and I'm a huge fan of the people that make up our diverse aviation community. Today's guest on Flight Club is an actor, a comedy writer, and a hardcore general aviation pilot. He wrote a hilarious book called American Tantrum. He's written some of my favorite jokes on TV and film. He flies his Cessna 182 all over the country for work, fun, and adventure, and he's doing it the right way. Aviators, welcome Neil Casey to Flight Club.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
All right. Welcome, Neil. Good to meet you finally. And thank you for coming on the show. I think I met you through a mutual friend who works on he's working on a comedy show right now for HBO.
Yep.
He's getting into aviation too. So.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about. I'm not going to say his name.
Right.
I took him for an unofficial Discovery flight. I'm not an instructor, but I took him for lunch out to Fox Field, to one of my favorite diners out there.
Foxy's Landing.
Yeah. And we had lunch and talked about it when his interest was piqued. We share a lot of friends in show business. We knew each other before that, but we became better friends talking planes. Like
show
a lot
business
of people can.
Yeah. What do you, speaking of show business and aviation, what do you, on Monday, what do you want to do most? You want to write, act, or fly an airplane?
I always want to fly an airplane. It's I've made a steady career as a writer, and that's I'm very lucky that that's the case. And you can make a steady career as a writer. As an actor, you're always kind of waiting for your phone to ring, and that's not really in my nature. Though I'm always happy when people want to point a camera at this. I'll never complain, But I made a pretty steady career as a writer. I wrote at Saturday Night Live. I was the head writer for the MTV Movie Awards for Amy Schumer in 2015. I've written a lot of jokes for a lot of shows. Some are more glamorous than others, but that's the other thing about a writer. If you do a show you love, then you can brag about it. And if you do a show you love less, your name just whips by at the end. It's not your face on it.
Yeah.
So.
How was writing on SNL? I mean, talk about busy environments. And a lot going on in the cockpit. How was that?
There's some amount of task saturation at SNL for sure.
Yeah.
That was my first big, writing job. I'd come up in New York at a comedy theater called the Upright Citizens Brigade. Mm-hmm. When I showed up, I was 19. I was the kid. And then I was kind of in my prime. And then by the time I was 30, I was old man improv, directing sketch shows and, geriatric in my early 30s. And then I got hired for SNL as a writer. It's as fast paced as everybody says. I'd read a number of the books. I was always a fan of the show. I knew a lot of people who already worked there, luckily. Yeah, it was thrilling. I shared an office with my good friend, Bobby Moynihan. Mm-hmm. He and I had been friends for many, many years. We used to do touring shows on the road for, $150 a pop to go to Columbus, Ohio and knock out a comedy show. Yeah. So he and I shared an office, which was nice. So it was always a thrill to get something on the air. The first thing I ever got on the air was a sketch with Louis C.K. I got a very silly sketch on with Bobby with everybody, all the cast members dressed up as the Avengers. The first Avengers had just come out. Oh, yeah. And it was just, awesome. The silliest thing where Hawkeye just ran out of arrows and he's like, all right, guys, you take it from here. I'll see you later. As silly as that, right? The fun is everybody dressing up. It's very thrilling to know that, you're up there adjusting things till right before we come back from commercial. And then you step out of the way and the camera goes red. And then it's, there's 7 million people watching it or something. It's a great feeling.
I've been around a lot of comics and my career as a corporate pilot, I've done a lot of comedy tours. I've flown the biggest people around on tours, and I've spent a lot of time on the road. I had Craig Ferguson on the show, and I've spent 2 years touring with that guy. Oh yeah, okay. And the community, I was always just amazed at the tight knit community of the comedy, whether it's stand-ups or writers or actors, and anywhere we'd go, people would get together and hang out and go to dinner. And I had an experience with. Craig, one time we were in Cleveland at the places there. Yeah. And John Lovitz was on. Yeah. And Craig played a big theater. And then after we all went over, luckily, he was kind enough to invite me. Yeah. We ended up watching the comedy show. John, he went on for 3 hours. He sang, he danced, he told stories. And it was really, really good. And then they opened, now it's 2 a.m. They opened the restaurant up for us, for Craig and John. And all of a sudden, all these comedians just start showing up. Right. And it's this huge, everyone's there and stories. And I just kind of sat back and it was such a cool community. It kind of reminds me of the aviation community, right? we walk into a pilot lounge and everybody kind of knows each
Yeah,
other.
yeah. Everybody's got some friend in common or something
Yeah.
if you spend long enough talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Comedians, on the other hand, one thing they have in common is that whether they did 15-minute set or a 3-hour set, it feel like it entitles them to stay out all night afterwards. That's true of a lot of comics. Yeah.
And then sleep all day.
Yeah.
But here, talk about airplanes.
Yeah.
When did you first get the bug?
Well, I was always interested in it. And, I kicked myself a little bit because I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, and we've got a nice regional airport there that has occasional commercial service. But
is that ILG?
ILG, yeah. And it's basically a Philly reliever, and it's a GA airport, essentially. I mean, I think Frontier went there for a little bit. They don't anymore. There's another one that does now. I forget the name of it, but it's a smaller one that does the runs to Tampa and whatever, which is great. I'm happy for the city. But I kicked myself because if I'd known, I could have gotten my butt off of Microsoft Flight Simulator and like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, and I could have gone down to.
Did you play? Did you have
all the time
simulator?
as a high school? Yeah, as a high
really?
schooler. Yeah, just on the Dell Pentium 75. Nice. I was just running a Microsoft Flight Simulator.
So you've kind of had the bug then since you're
always
young.
been interested in it. Yeah, and then never. I just wish I do. When I look back, I wish that I had done the research and found out that I could be logging hours doing something. Gliders or really my primary training as a teenager because life took a whole different turn. I went to my state school, University of Delaware. I joined the improv group there. I was a big fan of the Upright Citizens Brigade TV show. They had a sketch show on Comedy Central that I thought was just the best.
It was great, yeah.
And then me and my buddy Jay, who I was in AP Physics with, we'd go up to New York to just see a show there and then like sleep at a youth hostel, and then come back. Not all the time, but like once or twice. So I got bit by the bug and then I moved to New York. Right after college. And that's where I started my sort of, comedy arc, performing at the theater and then, booking commercials, doing like an Adult Swim TV show, writing, submitting. Like I had like a small writing job on a Comedy Central show. You just get these little jobs when you're really in the trenches. You're really at the kind of waiting for your first thing. But anyway, my life was all in New York. And I looked into it a little bit because I always had a day job. I was always doing something, usually with computers. To make a living and then comedy at night, the way you can do in your 20s when you have the energy for it.
So you were working how about you had a computer job and you were having this night, like trying to build a comedy stuff?
Yeah. I always had a computer programming job, sometimes freelance stuff. I would teach in the summertime. I teach theater up at the Williamstown Theater Festival, that sort of thing. Even today, I don't know where my next dime comes from after the next job. So you're always just putting the puzzle together to make a living and figure things out. But I was always working. I'm not one of those comedians with a trust fund.
Right.
There's a lot of them. I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of them.
Not the good ones.
Some
the
very
good ones had
talented
to work
people.
for it.
Some very talented people were able to hone their craft instead of working for a living for a long time. So good for them.
Being hungry
sour
makes you
grapes.
good.
So when I would have a couple of bucks in my pocket, I was interested. But what are the options in New York City? I mean, it's wildly expensive. You have to go out to like Islip or Farmingdale, or then into Jersey to like Linden or Teterboro.
I don't know if I'd want to learn there, man.
I don't think so either. So anyway, living in Queens or Brooklyn or Manhattan, which I did at various times, getting to a GA airport to learn to fly, and then the amount of like flying in that type of airspace and just how much it costs and everything. So it really started when I moved out here, when I moved to Los Angeles. Though I was interested the whole time. But I'm very evangelical about it. I tell people all the time, if you have even a passing interest in flying airplanes, you live in the greatest place on planet Earth to do it if you're in the American Southwest. Corner Nevada, Arizona, here. Like if you even want to do it a little bit and you're here, you really have no excuse.
Okay, so you moved out here. What brought you out here?
Work. I after SNL, I worked for Amy Schumer's show on Comedy Central for 2 seasons. But essentially, I was just
work brought you out.
Yeah, there's just not as many jobs in New York as LA. And my friend Nick Kroll had his show on Comedy Central, and they just offered me a writing job on it. And I said, well, if I'm not going to move to LA for this, I'm saying that I'm never going to move to LA, and I wasn't willing to say that. So I made the move in 2014.
You got out to LA, working here. You're like, all right, I'm going to learn to fly.
Yeah, I was working a job. I was working an acting job for a show that Paul Feig created for Yahoo Screen when the fine people at Yahoo were dabbling in television for a little while, and so it was a good job with regular hours, and the checks were clearing, and I just finally one day went out to, I forget the name of the outfit, they're not around anymore. This guy Jay, he's a good guy, ran at Van Nuys, and I just signed up for their discovery flight, like a lot of people would. And then the first thing I flew was either a Grumman Cheetah or a Grumman Traveler. I think because I flew both. They had a Cheetah, Traveler, and a Tiger at this outfit.
So you went the Grumman route.
I went the Grumman route, and I believe it was a Cheetah. There's a YouTube video of it that I downloaded somewhere. I couldn't find it before here because I would have looked and seen the tail number or something. But yeah, that was the discovery flight thing. They don't know if it's just like somebody's parents or their girlfriend buying it for them as a little thrill. So they like put they had a GoPro in there and gave me my little certificate and stuff. But then I talked to my instructor afterwards and I was like, no, I really want to do this.
Now we got that out of the way. Yeah. You did a good job selling me. Let's go.
yeah. This was all very cute, but I really want to do it. But at the same time, I was kind of a professional student for a little while. My instructor, Kevin, was a great dude, but he wasn't really instructing that much. He'd moved on to flying for charters and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I was always interested in making progress, but I never I would take breaks. I worked another job back in New York.
Yeah.
So, it was stop and start a lot of the time.
That's a pretty tough way of doing it. Continue.
But yeah, I flew a couple Grummans out of there. It was great fun, but it was all out of Van Nuys.
Yeah.
My first discovery flight I remember was in like spring of 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And but I didn't get my private until like 2017, I think. Because I would take long breaks and not do it at all for months. And then a lot of times, especially acting jobs, you get a job out of town, you're gone for 2 or 3 months. And then
that's the tough way to do that. I mean, you learn a bunch of stuff and then you forget a bunch of stuff and you learn a bunch of stuff and it's, until you have those reps down, it's really tough to do that start and stop. And, I always, a lot of my friends' kids are now becoming pilots. It's such a good job now. And I'm like, go do it full time. Treat it like college.
Mm-hmm.
Just go learn,
Yeah.
And I actually instructed at Santa Monica.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because when I was an instructor in the early 2000s at Santa Monica Airport, we had a lot of actors, people that work in Hollywood that were very similar to you. They were very busy. Sometimes they're on location, they're gone. And so they would start and stop it. So I had students that I wouldn't see for months and months and months. They'd pop in, we'd do a lesson, spool them all up, and I wouldn't see them for months.
Yeah.
And it's so you did that, and that was a lot of Van Nuys?
That was all out of Van Nuys, and it was all rentals. And then my buddy Kevin got a very demanding job, I think in addition to still flying charters, as he was flying and managing this guy's company, Phenom.
Oh, cool.
And he was flying that. And he actually, when the Phenom came out of annual one time, I joined him because he's just a friend of mine now. I'd gone to a full-time instructor to kind of start over, an old school guy named Richard Mend, who runs all the fast team seminars up at Van Nuys and other places. Great guy and real by the books, like straightforward instructor. But his thing was like, we'll do it. I knew I had time to do it. And he was like, we'll do it my way, starting from scratch, my worksheets, all this stuff. And I was like, great, let's do it. Awesome. So then about a year later, I had my private, and I bought my 182 while I was still training.
Oh, you did?
Because that was, anyway, I'm getting off track.
Did you do your training in the 182?
I did. I finished my training in the 182. Because Richard and this would happen with me and Kevin too, when I had no time, is sometimes we would just be renting from somebody at Van Nuys, and then you'd get there, and then on the pre-flight, the pitot heat would spark and the fuse would blow, and you go, well, I'm not flying today, and this is the only time I can fly this week. Yeah, it's the only time Kevin could fly with me, and he's a great dude, but he was squeezing me in.
Yep.
So then when I started with Richard, some of that same stuff was happening, where he was like, oh, I've got a plane we can rent here at Van Nuys, and some of that same stuff would happen. And I had just done a sitcom on Fox. A lot of people would buy a car. Mm-hmm. I was still driving my 2005 Toyota Corolla.
Perfect.
Yeah. And there was this 182 for sale at Glendale Municipal in Arizona.
Oh yeah.
And I saw it on controller, and it was a 182 with like real old like narco, avionics and GPS. Oh yeah, my Com 2 is still a narco.
Dude, I love that.
My Com 2 is still narco.
Is it?
Yeah,
it's
runs great. Doesn't break. If you hear that warmth as it fires up, the tubes in there, I saw this, and it was that classic thing. Like I saw it, I was like looking at it, and then it went away and it was sold. I was like, damn, I wish I bought that plane. And then like a week later, it came back up. I was like, all right, well, maybe.
Failed pre-buy. I'm not afraid of that airplane.
Maybe I did. I paid for a pre-buy out there. There were a couple things that had to be taken care of. But then my former instructor and then friend Kevin, we flew commercial to Phoenix, and then we Ubered out and did a little test flight, and then I bought the plane.
Cool.
And then we flew it back VFR. It was
so. Did you walk onto the set the next day at the sitcom and like everyone's buying cars? You're like, I bought a plane.
No, the sitcom was over. It was rapidly canceled by Fox while we were shooting. They did it. It was a good show, but I thought the funny show and great people working on it. But we had a 13 episode order, and then it started airing on Fox, and then the ratings sucked, so then they dropped the order to 9. But whatever. I still got paid and I financed half the plane. I didn't buy it with cash, but I bought my 182. And then I kept training in it, and then I got my private with Richard Mend, and then I just loved flying around. Then I got my instrument in 2020 in that same plane. I did a whole avionics upgrade on the plane for the ADSB and all that.
Yep.
Guy named Jim Gregory.
You did like what, the GTN 750, something like that?
Not even. I put in a used GNS 530W.
Oh, okay.
And then a lot of used stuff. One of those 106. It's the same one as the Mid-Continent, but it's Garmin branded CDI. I still have a backup Nav 2 that's like one of those self-contained needle things that I test it every 30 days, but I don't really use it for anything except the dual check against the 530W. And then it wasn't a huge panel upgrade. It's still 6-pack. It still looks very old school, but I just pulled out the Air Gizmo thing where they had a VFR non-certified Garmin GPS plugged in and just blew all that out and put in the 530W and just got it set for ADSB and for IFR.
Yeah, I mean that's all you need. Like doing the kind of flying that we do in GA. You don't need like the G1000. It's nice, but
it's nice. Yeah, I'll probably get I'll put the attitude and the heading indicator over here, and I'll get a digital engine display, and then maybe those the Garmin 275s or even the Aerovonics. And I guess there's something else now, but the AV30s look cool to me. I don't know. Someday, got to get a paint job too.
Does it? Well, I mean, it's funny. Like these young kids that are coming up in aviation now. A lot of them have never flown the old steam gauges. Like they just in schools have glass cockpits, and the first airplane they fly has got a glass cockpit. And I don't even know if they would know how to do a scan,
right?
Like the 6-pack scan.
Yeah. I mean, Children of the Magenta Line, right?
Magenta Line.
I know that line. I know that video. Yeah.
That is such a great reference. I love that. Thanks, Neil. Yeah. All right. So you did finished your private up in that, and then you did your check ride with in Van Nuys.
Check ride with a guy named Greg Lewis, who's since passed away. I was sad to learn. But great guy. Richard did it like a 141 school, or tried to. So he'd have me at every phase. We'd fill out stuff, and then he would have me do a ride with another instructor who'd either never flown with me before or was just sort of arm's length from him. And that was all great because some of them had very different styles. Some of them did the pull the engine idle on downwind all of a sudden when we were talking about other stuff and like that kind of thing. So it was cool.
I love those guys.
Yeah, me too.
They're fun.
They're a fun really, and I just liked it. I actually felt like the way you can get out here, like I always say about Southern California, it's like the fleet's here, the instructors are here, you can just do it here. And I felt lucky that I got kind of, from my reading, I feel like I got kind of an old school flight instructing experience. And that was out of Whiteman. So when I bought my plane, I got a hangar at Whiteman that I still have, same one.
Awesome.
So then I was working out
Whiteman is people don't know Whiteman. It's a great little airport out there.
Yeah.
It's just on the edge of LA, and it's nice and quiet.
Yeah.
And you get to watch the people pick up the banners, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. After my son was born, when my son was born, and I had the plane, but I forget something was going on. I wasn't flying. I didn't have my license, but I would just take him up and watch the planes take off and land. The only way he could nap was in the car. So I'd get him on a nice sleep all the way to Whiteman. And then I'd hang out at Whiteman with my scanner, listen to the tower frequency. And then when he'd wake up, I'd be like, look.
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah. It's so funny. My son, they go out and watch airplanes now.
Yeah.
They just go out to the airport and they like, oh, that's a Falcon 2000. That's they love doing that. He's not even a pilot. He just likes watching airplanes.
We go to that old Flight Squadron restaurant a lot when he was a kid. They're gone now. They closed the COVID.
96 Squadron.
Right. Oh,
that
man,
place
was
was
fun.
great.
Yeah.
Man. Food was horrible, but it was just great.
The Sunday brunch buffet was all right. You could, how's this bacon doing?
That place is pretty dirty. It could have used a cleaning, but it was kind of an iconic Van Nuys experience.
Yeah.
So did you do I always like to ask people where their first solo was and your experience with your first time flying an airplane by yourself. Was that at Van Nuys?
Yeah, it was at Whiteman in my plane. My first solo was at Whiteman in my plane with Richard Mend. And he had warned me, he said, when my weight's not in the front seat, it's just going to handle a little different. And, it's a lot of back pressure on landing for the 182 and all that stuff. He just got off. He was standing over by the fuel pump watching. And it took off
Did you know it was coming that day?
Yeah,
or you
I did. I didn't know exactly when it would be, but we had been talked about it. I'd done his pre-solo test and all that stuff and done all that paperwork. So I knew it would be a lesson or two away.
Yeah.
And he was pretty predictable that way. Again, great instructor.
And you guys did some turns in the pattern.
And then he got out.
You had engine running. You hopped out.
Yep.
And then you took off and then you rotated.
Rotated,
over.
Right traffic for 3-0, looked over, nobody's there, and felt the handling just a little different. Like, okay, I'm a little lighter, I'm climbing a little faster.
How was your landing?
It was okay. It was okay. Yeah, I didn't 3-0. I was less familiar with, but I had the airspeed pegged. I usually only land with 30 degrees of flaps in the 182. It can do 40, which I really only do for short fields typically.
Yeah.
It was all right. It was thrilling. It was great. And then I forget how many I did. I think I did like 2 or 3 laps in the pattern, and then came back to get him. And then we debriefed on it. It was great. It was a great day.
Oh, that's awesome.
A lot of exclamation points in the logbook.
Really?
Yeah.
Like such a fun. I did my, our aviators know I tell the story all the time. I did all my training in Santa Monica. Well, we were over in Van Nuys doing pattern work, and my instructor just dropped it on me. And he's like, pull over here. Jumped out, and we called it the soccer mom bench at Van Nuys. It's where all the instructors get out and they just sit there and watch on 16 left there, and you did the lap on the pattern. So it's
I was just at Corona. I just did my flight review, and we went to Corona just because.
Oh, you did?
And they still have that bench there. I remember they used to have like scorecards there.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Oh,
at least for some period of time, it was like whiteboards or something.
Yeah.
Nobody scored my landings, probably for the better. But I remember I was doing the thing where the aircraft Spruce shuttle will pick you up at Corona. There's a great diner there. So I needed to buy something from Spruce. I didn't want to wait. Flew down there, flew in. But then when I was walking back to my plane, I saw the bench with the whiteboards. I was sort of like, oh, okay. Old timers coming out here giving you like,
don't judge me.
Just a big thumbs down,
I used to fly in all the time out of San Ynez Airport.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of my favorite airports in the world.
Yeah.
But there's this group of dudes that are always there, sitting on the bench of the grass. And if you had a bad landing, they're going to make a comment when you're walking through the gate.
Yeah.
Like, call that a landing.
I ran into the CEO of King Schools.
Really?
Not John, the new guy who's like interspersed into some of the videos, like tall, real CEO looking guy. Good dude. But I saw the King Schools plane. I parked next to it at Santa Ynez a few years ago. A buddy of mine and I were just doing our we just went to Solvang and hit a beer garden and stayed overnight at some, we were just hanging out.
Yeah.
And then it was still there the next morning, and I met the guy. But I was like, "This is a King Schools plane." My friend didn't care, but I was like, "I love these guys."
Yeah. Was it the 172? They're 172.
Yeah, all branded out. Yeah.
Did you ever hear the story about Martha King landing in Santa Barbara?
No.
Oh God. So I'll tell the story really quick. So Martha King, all of our aviators know who Martha King is. If you're not a pilot, you may not know who Martha King is, but she's sort of legendary, iconic flight instructor in aviation. Every pilot grew up on her.
Yeah.
On their videos. So her and John had just bought that airplane, brand new, and it had a tail number on it that had been previously registered to a stolen aircraft.
Yes.
And this is when the FAA changed. After this, they changed all of their re-registration rules. So they had been, the law enforcement had been tracking this airplane from Arizona. I think it flown from Mesa or something. And they eventually called Santa Barbara Air Traffic Control. The local police were alerted. And as soon as that airplane touched down, it was surrounded by cops, then shut the engine down. They made her get out of the car or out of the airplane, hands up, handcuffed her.
Yeah.
And this is like Martha King. You're like, this is, and I'm from Santa Barbara. I live in Santa Barbara, and I was so embarrassed. I'm like, this is we just arrested Martha King.
Yeah, that's like a Bob Hoover level mess up.
Idiots.
I read their article about that. They wrote they emailed that out to their mailing list, but it was in one of it's like AOPA magazine or something. But I remember reading that. Yeah, it's like I stepped out of the plane. It's like sirens and people with hands on their guns and stuff. It's wild.
Know, like this is like this sweet older woman.
Yeah.
God, she was in her jumpsuit.
They are the best. Yeah, I love them. I did both my private and ground. I did my ground school in addition to the ground I was doing with my instructor with both private and instrument for Kings. It sticks with you. Some people say that, and I'm one of them. It's like it's so cheesy. Sometimes it's so funny, but it just stays in your head.
I know.
Like when I'm there doing the written test, it's there because of how they do it. I don't know where the magic comes from, but they got it.
Oh my gosh. Well, so you now that you have, so this is the same airplane. You're flying a lot, and you've you kind of told me a few of your stories. I love to, I mean, when you and I were talking before the show, and you're explaining to me how you fly, you're you're doing it right. I really appreciate.
Oh, thanks.
A lot of people get their pilot's license and they just kind of dabble, and you're not that kind of aviator. I think you've done it right, and you've really used it to do some cool stuff.
Yeah, I love to do it. I mean, if I have any amount of free time, I want to plan a flight and I want to go somewhere. And I love going to Catalina. That's a challenge. I've gone across the country. I've gone halfway across the country. I've gone all the way across the country and back, southern route and northern route.
Yeah.
I've taken some great trips with my son. He came with me on the first leg from LA to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And then he left with his grandparents, and then he ended up going back to LA. Yeah. Commercial, and then I flew back my own way. We've gone up the West Coast up to Camas, Washington, and stuff. I love it. I love how small the American Southwest becomes with the GA aircraft. I love going up to Kern River, Kern Valley.
Kernville,
I just love it. The getting out to Palm Desert so easy. Getting to Vegas is so easy. It's
like when
so much
you
fun.
guys flew from the West. I've actually never flown an airplane, a small airplane from the West Coast to the East Coast. It's something I want to do. How long did you guys take when you flew out to North Carolina? That flight with your son.
We left early, and I'd planned on getting as far as the Continental Divide in Albuquerque. So we were going to stay somewhere near Albuquerque, but it was so bumpy and he got airsick. My stomach wasn't doing great. I have never puked in the plane. He has a number of times, but he's tough about it. He's a real trooper. He knows where the little blue bags are, and he's a tough kid. So we diverted to Sedona. So that like everything in aviation is just change of plans, ended up in Sedona. You
got to be flexible when you're pilot. Yeah, I like it.
So that was day one, night one. We spent in Sedona. And then the next day was also pretty bad, but we agreed we were just going to push through it. We got up early, tried to beat it. But by the time we were crossing Albuquerque into Texas, it was real bumpy. But then as soon as we got over the Continental Divide, as soon as we were in Texas, it was just heavenly. Yeah. It was so nice. And then we landed in Amarillo, Texas, and we went to the big Texan roadside thing with the big cowboy, like Route 66 thing. They had like one of those old shooting galleries like Disneyland, big chair.
Except they were real 45s. It's Texas. Come on.
He loved it. He got a cowboy hat, all this stuff. And then we ate at one of those. We ate at a steak restaurant, and they had one of those things where it's like they got the big steak and it's free if you finish it. And like nobody does. He and I. Did
you give it a go? Did you give it a go?
I didn't. But we watched the guy. It was like, here's Mickey from Louisiana or whatever. Then Mickey is up there, and he just gave up and was just like picking at his potatoes. Like he couldn't do it. But myself, we had a great night and just stayed at a little hotel there. And then that was night 2. And then from Amarillo, we have a family, cousins in Ozark, Missouri, and there was an air met for tornadoes. Yeah. So I flew all the way down.
So you're in the summer. You're flying out there in the summer.
This was like the first week of June.
Okay.
And so we skirted it down from Oklahoma and then up to Springfield. And then after Missouri, we made it all the way to Western North Carolina the next day. Yeah. That was a lot of IFR flying and then VFR on top. Over near Charlotte. But then there was some thunderstorms popping up, and then there was a whole squall line along the coast. Yeah. So we landed at not very far, but at Stanley County Airport, where the owner-manager, was one of his last days working, a guy with the last name Swearingen, gave us a ride into town. Yeah. When I landed, the guy goes, "You're in Mayberry, man. There's no Uber. There's no taxi."
Oh, God,
I'll give you a ride.
He did. Like, I'm going to walk down the tower and give you a ride.
And he gave us a ride to town. So then, but then the next morning we got set up. I did file IFR, and then it was like half an hour to Dare County, Outer Banks, and then my brother and his wife picked us up at Dare County when they were coming down from Philly, and then we just did a week at the beach, and then did Wright Brothers, Memorial Monument.
Those are like core memories your son is going to have. Like he may not like say anything now, but he's going to grow up and talk about that.
I hope so. We're doing it again this summer, I think.
Yeah. Like maybe take the northern route over the Great Lakes. And I don't know.
I did. I did that by myself coming back. I was on my little Wright Brothers tour. I wouldn't take passengers over the lake, but me with my life vest and stuff, it was, as my instructor's words always stick in my head. When I was flying into New Orleans, I was over this like swamp area where there's like, oh, there's a guy's shack with a little boat out front. I guess gators. That's where I'll there's gators. And then same thing flying over the Great Lakes. My instructor man, it's like engine failures happen after you change something. Set it. Right. Don't change anything.
Don't change anything. That's right.
Let it go.
Just don't touch it. Let us do a thing. Being over water in a plane like that over the Great Lakes, you can feel pretty vulnerable, right? And the same thing applies if we're flying jets over the, like I just did a flight back from Papeete, Tahiti back to California, and you're basically 4 hours from land.
Yeah.
And you're in the water, something really bad happened. So the Great Lakes are one of those things, like whenever I was flying airplanes, I never even think like we're over water now, right? You really are.
Yeah.
It's big. Do you, you're like, one of the things that, I learned from a lot of your aviation stories is that you've kind of used it. It's almost like like get in the car, kids, let's go and go for trips. And that's pretty cool. A lot of people use aviation for work and they fly. I have an office in LA and San Francisco, and they're pilots and they fly back and forth. That's in there. They're doctors, right? In Santa Barbara, we've got a really big community of doctors that live in Santa Barbara that work in Bakersfield.
Oh, okay.
And they fly over the mountains all the time.
And
we've lost a couple hitting the mountains, unfortunately.
Really?
Yeah. That's a whole nother episode. But
I know the mountains. Yeah, I know the one. I like Tehachapi up there, but east of Bakersfield. That's a great little
one. But I just love hearing your stories about that. So speaking of, so you and I talked about Catalina. You've flown to Catalina a lot. That's one of my, I love these small airports, and Catalina is one. That's an iconic. You got to go to Catalina if you're a pilot sometime.
I agree. Yeah. My son and I we did one night of camping at the airport, which they let you do if you're in the Aero Club and you're a California resident. I don't know why California resident, but that's the rule. They've got spots where you can tie down, and then they've got some campsite things, pretty basic, but real nice.
You kind of you park your airplane and camp out the plane?
You can do that. When we got out there, I saw that they had some of these blocks where it's like, oh yeah, that's where the three wheels would go. Yeah. I parked there the way I'm used to parking there, which is sort of backed into the gravel.
Yeah.
And then we walked to the campsite, but I saw somebody else they were really doing the underwing camping. So I'll do that next time.
Yeah.
I love going to Catalina. It's such a fun landing.
Yeah.
I don't post too much online, but when I'm flying a friend and they film me landing in Catalina, it's like, that's really, that'll be a story. Yeah. I'll put that up, let people see.
Yeah.
That's pretty fun.
I mean, it's one of those airports where if you go there, you got to go there a few times to get comfortable with it. Because it's really, so I used to fly for a family that we went there every single day. You probably know the family, and they're very involved in the island, and they had a caravan.
Oh, and so caravans. Yeah.
So I would fly. I mean, we're doing sometimes 4 times a day.
Cool.
Just flying back and forth between the LA and Catalina. So I got really comfortable with that airport.
But got used to that downdraft on short final.
Well, yeah, no, you play the downdraft. We called it the 2-2 dip, right?
Yeah. And I didn't know they called it that. That's great.
Yeah, the 2-2 dip. How's it on the Fiasa Tower? How's a 2-2 dip today? It's not a real tower, but he's always giving you direction.
I know that guy. Yeah.
My kids love going to that airport. They've grown up going there, and then we'll run down to Avalon for the day and just spend a day on the island or hiking out there. It's just a really neat. There's not a whole lot of airports that you can fly into like that and go on an adventure there. Go for a hike.
Yeah. The walk around the airport's real nice. I've gone down to Catalina with him and spent a weekend there. That was a tough one where this is like bonehead moment on my part, but it was, I filed IFR to get there because it was cloudy in between. So they had us do the thing, it's like running clockwise. So they had us go east in and kind of then over Santa Ana and then out. And then I canceled. It was VFR at Avalon. But obviously I checked everything going in. But when I landed, the guy was like, well, the airport's, the runway's closed on Monday. And I was like,
is it?
Yeah, this was a while ago.
Oh,
no,
okay.
This was a particular thing. They were redoing the taxiway. So after they'd redone the thing, then they were redoing the taxiway. And I said, I said, well, no, because, for flight will typically, if the airport's closed anytime soon, it'll give you some kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I looked ahead and the actual wording of the NOTAM, again, my fault. I was planning on taking off Monday. I should have looked ahead for future things. But it was phrased in a way where it was like closed to fixed wing traffic starting Monday. So it didn't have the red alert quality to it where it would pop up for check this one out, even though it's not starting for a couple of days. And I said, well, what are we going to do? So I sent my son and his mom home on the ferry. They got an extra day in Catalina, but I was up there at 7 a.m. Right. The NOTAM came into effect at 8.
Yep.
And it was an IFR departure. I was talking to SoCal on the runway. I let a couple other people take off before me. Some kind of irresponsibly, in my opinion. So a couple guys just jump in and go. It's like, that's a twin, man. Just threw a bunch of people. You just threw your pissed off wife and daughter into your twin and you need to do a walk around, and he fired up and left. It's like, I'm just listening so that I could be helpful for the NTSB report. He was fine. He, nothing. I didn't hear any loud noises. But then I took off IFR, and then it got above it, and then it was just VFR to Whiteman. But it was a wild morning. It was one of those obviously I wasn't going to do it with passengers, but for me it was one of those well, I'm pointed to the direction where if anything goes wrong on this takeoff, they'll see me coming down into the harbor, gliding it down, and find a friendly fisherman or something. But it ended up fine. But it was one of those well, I'm not going to leave my airplane here for a month. Yeah. So time to take off at 7 a.m.
Get out of there. I actually watched an airplane ditch off of Catalina one time. Yeah. I was coming in because I was there so often, and this airplane, they had just departed 22. They're on the downwind heading to Long Beach or wherever they're going, and they declared Mayday on the Unicom frequency. And I actually relayed to ATC. I was talking to ATC, going back and forth, getting ready to arrive, and they had an engine failure on downwind, and they couldn't make it back to the runway. And so they just all right, we're ditching, and they circled, and they just circled down right off the end of the runway there in the water, and found a boat. And the guy it was on a 182 actually. Wow. And I just circled above him and watched, and he did a brilliant job. Landed the airplane. It didn't flip over and plunked it in the water. And he and I think it was 2 people. They both got out, and I could see them, and they did a great job, and the boat came and picked them up. So
good on him. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's happened quite a few times out there. So
he's lucky there's somebody there, because that's kind of the wrong side to go down on. I mean, you can't control it, but that's not a lot going on the that side of the island.
Yeah. Okay. let's not do that.
Yeah.
Where else have you, what's some of your other favorite airports?
So my favorite airport of all time is Santa Paula. Yeah. I love refueling at Santa Paula. The fuel's so cheap, it pays for the lunch I have there. It's great. I did my aerobatics there. I did all the 3 modules of the aerobatic training, and I got my tail wheel out there.
You did your tail wheel?
I got my tail wheel at
cool.
in a
decathlon?
Yeah, not even a super decathlon. It actually might have been a Citabria, because I flew all 3. They've got a decathlon, a super decathlon, and I think 2 Citabrias.
Were you out there doing their upset recovery course?
I was doing all that. I did all that first, and that's how my instructor Cade is a great guy. He's in the Navy now. Yeah. But he's his Instagram's great. And he's but I did all the did my rolls and loops and Immelmans and all that fun stuff in the super decathlon. All that training over, it's 3 different modules. So I would do it in one 3 or 4 day period. I'd stay out in Santa Paula and do it. Yeah. And then take a break, come back, take a break, come back. Did that a couple times. But I had a good time with him, and I'd logged all these tail wheel hours with him. And I just said, if I come back to do tail wheel, how long do you think it would take? And he's like 2 days or 3 days. I forget what he said. But I just came back and got refreshed on it and did my tail wheel. I don't fly any tail wheels. I would brush up on it if I were ever going to fly one again, but I just wanted it. Yeah. Got logged so many hours doing them.
That upset recovery course, I think is really important for pilots to do. I mean, a lot of guys don't do it. And I think it's even a professional pilot, just getting in that position. Yeah. And they put you in some pretty uncomfortable
inverted
scenarios.
You're flying inverted for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that I've done all those spins, not the 1 or 2 that people, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not a CFI, but not the minimum required for CFI, but I've done 15 spins, 20 spins. It's
well, I don't even think they teach spins anymore in primary training.
They don't. I think it's only when you get your CFI that you have to do one. And some people just do one, they just do it as one lesson. We were doing them every day. We were starting the day with a spin. just finish my coffee.
Some people have coffee. Some people go spin airplanes.
But it's great. And I speaking of bonehead moves, like there were plenty of times where I was sort of like, doing it, and I was feeling it, but it was great. I mean, it was so much fun. It was great. It was really, I don't like flying inverted. That doesn't agree with me physiologically.
It's not
but
good.
the loops and rolls and stuff are great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that.
Were you able to do the zero or the one gravity? The
yeah,
one G roll
yeah.
That's pretty. That precision flying is really. I think it's like having that experience as just even if you're a private pilot up to a professional.
Yeah,
like it's really good, man. It just gives you that tool.
Yeah.
And we don't. When we get in the sim for the jet training that I do, you're with another pilot and you guys play with each other and get it uncomfortable, but that stuff comes back right away. You're like,
what's that story about the guy who did the 1G roll in the 737? It's one of those stories that I've just heard, hangar talk, but it's like somebody once did a 1G roll in a 737 or 747, and they were like, it's a 1G maneuver.
Yeah, no, it is. Well, they back in the day, the Boeing test pilots used to do that kind of stuff. There's that very the 707 doing the barrel roll,
right,
and they'll do it. That's
what I say to my passengers. It's like, it's like this turbulence sucks. This turbulence may suck, but like I'm not going to show you what the actual limit of the envelope is.
Right.
It's like it reassures people, I hope, that it's like, this is nothing. Like we're flying smooth. We're doing very smooth climbs and descents and trying to make it as comfortable as possible. But like, this is nowhere near my limit for like what I know the airplane can do. I have no intention of doing it, but.
Well, and also that tail wheel thing's pretty. So I became I've actually been friends with these guys for a long time, but they're bush pilots in California.
Mm-hmm.
And you think of, we talked about California being a great, aviation community in the West here. You don't really think of it as like a bush flying community, but out in Santa Ynez, these guys, there's a big group of guys that have Cubs and Cessna 180s. And I've been kind of hanging out with these guys, and it's really cool. I'm like, it's kind of got me fired up to maybe get a 180 and get the, I've always owned airplanes, but like having that with big Tundra tires and landing in fields and on top of mountains, it's really appealing to me.
They've got a book of them at the restaurant at Kern Valley, which is another great restaurant. Because I remember I took a few pictures of them, but they've got unofficial maps and photographs of all these like totally uncharted backcountry strips and gravel and stuff like that, which again, my tricycle 182, it's not going to happen.
Right.
But I took some pictures of them because it's like the most local knowledge. It's like, here's some backcountry places. It was very cool.
Yeah. There's a guy, Cub Doug. I'll give a shout out to Cub Doug.
Yeah.
He's kind of pioneered a lot of these places up in the central coast of California, up in the Sierras too. There's up around Kernville. I guess there's a bunch of backcountry strips in there that could be. And I'm just like, in my point in life right now, and I've flown airplanes for a long time, but I kind of want to go do some adventures, and that's why I kind of love hearing your stories about aviation adventures. So
I did my little exercise. I was on my cross country on the northern route back. I left Omaha, Nebraska, and I was going to Custer, South Dakota, where Mount Rushmore is basically.
Yeah.
And that's the one where I kept the flight plan in case of whatever, but I turned it like I wasn't going off GPS, wasn't following the Magenta line, and I just had plotted it out that I just follow the Missouri. That I would follow the Missouri River. I did it nice low and slow. I was just enjoying myself. It was a nice day. Low over the Missouri River, Lewis and Clark Lake, and I was talking to, I forget the name of the airport, but I was on flight following at that point. I'd climbed a little bit because I was going into the hills pretty soon. But I had one of those things at the moment. There was no artifice to it. In the moment, I just said it because it was true. But there's this municipal airport coming up, and ATC said, like, for planning purposes, when are you turning west? Mm-hmm. And I said, like, when I hit something municipal, I'm going to turn west and follow the White River over the Badlands to the Black Hills.
Nice.
And after it came out of my mouth, I was like, "Ooh, I got to write that down." That is the plan. But like, ooh, that's a fun.
That's going to be a line in a movie somewhere. It's written down.
It felt like Lord of the Rings. Follow the White River over the Badlands. But that's what it says on the chart.
In the Black Hills.
And I had a very difficult crosswind landing in Custer that I hoped somebody saw and nobody did, but it was I was proud of myself. I was like, ooh, squeaked it like real greaser. And I was like, anybody? Nah.
Yeah. Dang it. That is, when you have those landings and nobody sees it.
Yeah.
Damn it.
But yeah, that was great. No, that's great. Beautiful country up there and incredible. And I borrowed a crew car. No, I paid for like one of those like rent-a-wreck kind of crew car places. I forget. It was like $25 a day.
Yeah.
I drove an old Buick to through Custer National Park and out to Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
And then I was going to camp at that airport. This is kind of funny. They had a big teepee and a campsite. And I was going to camp at the airport.
Oh, cool.
And I had camping stuff for that whole trip, that whole summer. And I didn't unpack, thankfully.
You just left it in the airplane?
I left it in the airplane.
Oh, that is really smart.
Borrowed the crew car because my plane was right there by the campsite. I taxied up and tied down there. And then I did that loop. I did this national park and I was all by myself. Did the national park and then I did Mount Rushmore. And then I went to like Calamity Jane's like burger joint or something. It was like this was the saloon in Custer. And then I came back and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go to bed. And I came around and I was like, oh, there's a ton of people camping here. I was like, what is this? What's going on?
Yeah.
It wasn't even late, but the sun was down. It was like 8:30 maybe. And I was like, what's going on here? And I was like, hey, guys. They're like, yes, sir. I was like, what's going on here? They're like, Civil Air Patrol. We're cadets. We're camping out. I was like,
nice.
Right. I said, I'm going to go get a motel room. Hi, how you doing? Like, hey, you mind if I stick it out? Set up, pitch my little tent here.
Yeah. You can just tell those kids some jokes. Be like, we don't understand, sir.
It's like I'm not gonna horn in on your camping trip here, guys. Like I flew in their 182s and stuff. So I went and got like a $100 hotel room at some real throwback.
It's like
roadside
the Boy Scouts of the sky is dropping in.
Yeah. Yes, sir. What are you doing? Camping, sir. All right. Well,
there's only a few things in aviation, at least fixed wing, that you wear flight suits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always curious, like, why do helicopter pilots wear flight suits? But the Civil Air Patrol, they wear flight suits.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? I guess it's a military thing. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've ruined some shirts with oil. Maybe I should start. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of want to wear a flight suit. They're really cool.
Yeah.
Just having a romper you wear every day, just zip it up. Like, all right.
Yeah. All my patches on it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's so funny. And then, so what do you think your son's gonna do? You think he's gonna be a pilot? You think he's gonna follow your?
I don't know. He says no. He says, he says he wants to be a major league ball player. So maybe I'll just follow him around to that side of his career. Yeah. If he did express an interest in it, I would. I have thought about this because I'm going to go. I'm chasing ratings a little bit. I want to get seaplane up in Alaska if I can, or somewhere else. Yeah. And then I want to get commercial just because those maneuvers look fun and it's just always good to be. I've had good instructors for my flight reviews, but I'd always rather do a check ride than a flight review. Yeah. Just because. But if he were interested, I would get my CFI, maybe just VFR or something, just so we could log some hours with me and just get ahead of it. But as of now, he's 8. I have let him take the controls, a couple of times, and he likes it. Can't reach the rudders quite yet. Yeah, rudder pedals quite yet. But
kids are good pilots. Like my kids, I've had airplanes, and I'll put them they'll fly in the right seat. I'm like, keep that dot over that X. Just do that. Yeah, and they're like locked. They're locked in, man. That thing doesn't move.
Isn't it cool? Yeah, the world's most boring video game. Right?
Yeah, my son, he flew for like 3 hours one day, no autopilot, just like locked on it.
That's great. Maybe I won't put an autopilot. I was going to put an autopilot in the 182 eventually. Maybe not. Maybe I'll just while he's a teenager.
Like, here, son, fly.
I once met a guy. This is shout out to him. His name's Fred Eric, and I haven't spoken to him in a while. I lost track of him during COVID, and I hope he's doing well. He was in his late 90s when I met him, but he was driving an Uber, and he picked me up from a voiceover recording that I was doing for a cartoon in Hollywood, and he took me to a podcast I was doing at my friend Don Finelli's place. So it was a busy voice day, but he was a real older guy. He's in his 96 at the time. This was before COVID. So it was like 2018 or 19. Yeah. I'd had my private for maybe a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And I got in his Prius and he was playing this old like big band music and like whatever. And I got talking to him. Yeah. And I'm not going to do an imitation of his voice, but he had that real New York accent, that real kind of Bronx accent.
Oh, cool.
And I told him we were just talking. I told him I lived in New York. He was like, I saw the Yankees from the roof of my building, like all this stuff. He was telling all these stories. He was being really entertaining. And I said, I used to be on the Upper West Side. Yeah. Like, my buddy managed a bookshop on the Upper West Side. Was that there when you were a kid? He's like, no, nothing's the same. Nothing's the same. There's nothing the same. There's nothing that's the same at all. And I said, well, what about Zabar's? He goes, well, of course, Zabar's. But anyway, so we got to talking. He instructed in Mustangs during the Second World War.
No way.
So he taught people to fly Mustangs in Texas.
Wow.
For the Army Air Corps, I guess, or in the Second World War. Yeah. I said, well, hold on. Like, I'm a pilot. I got a 182.
Yep.
Like, I go, you want to go flying sometime?
Really?
Yeah. So I got his number. He lived out in Santa Monica by the airport. He's 96 years old. Lived out there. He had a girlfriend. He said he was robbing the cradle. She was in her 80s. And I said, you want to do it? So I exchanged contact info and all that stuff. And then he met me up at Whiteman. What reminded me of his flight suit is he had this flight jacket with some.
Did he roll in a jacket?
Mm-hmm. And he had the old jacket. And took a little while. Like he was mobile, but just climbing in and all that stuff. It was a real, brief life thing. So I took him out again to Fox Field. We were going to get lunch in Fox Field, but first we went to that near the west of those solar panels, that kind of maneuvering area where I did a lot of turns around a point, and so a lot of my private training out there in the desert. And I gave him controls. I let him fly the plane.
Yeah,
and he was very funny. He took it, dude. We do a couple maneuvers, and he goes, "It's a little sluggish."
Well, the last airplane he flew was a Mustang.
I know. I was like, yeah, compared to a Mustang, I guess so, and then we landed. We had lunch at Foxy's Landing, my favorite place to take people. And Santa Paula Diner is also great. It's just a short flight. People want to get a taste. Santa Paula, I'm there in 15, 20 minutes. Yeah. Fox Field takes it's a nice, feel a little more of a journey. Yeah. But yeah, it was great. Came back and
did you ever go? They put a Foxy's in Henderson now. Did you know that?
Yeah.
It's big. It's all fancy. It's not the same. You got to go Henderson Airport upstairs there.
That's a Foxy's now. I have been there. I've been there. I forgot that was what it was named. I always get it mixed up with the restaurant in North Vegas because I typically fly into North Vegas. And they've got that one. It's a little smaller, a little more modest, but also a great restaurant.
But if you want the real Fox's experience, you got to go out to the desert. You got to go to the desert.
Yeah. So. I love Henderson. That's that was my last stop on my cross country flight after Custer. I flew very high. I was on oxygen. Yeah. All the way through was it Eagle Lake or something to Preston, Idaho, little country airport there. My buddy has a summer house there, like a big ranch. We drove around on ATVs and stuff. It was a really good time. And then from there down Salt Lake, that's one that I wouldn't have done with passengers. There was a lot of weather. So I was planning to divert. There was if there, there's a gap, I think I can do it. But I knew where I was going to divert the whole time. But that was IFR. Yeah. Then I ended up being IFR, but then the storms were behind me, but it was still kind of rainy and drippy. Yeah. And then I flew IFR into Henderson, and I did one night in Vegas before I came home and back to real life. Yeah. So cool. After a long aviation journey, I got a steak at the Palm, and then headed home the next day. Yeah. I love Henderson. I love flying into Vegas.
So how often are you flying these days?
I mean, if I'm not flying once a week, I feel foolish for owning a 182. Yeah,
that's
every 2 weeks. If it's not every 2 weeks, you're might as well pickle the engine. They say.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go for longer gaps, but I have a little maintenance issue right now. I have what appears to be a little fuel leak on the co-pilot side on the right side. So my mechanic's getting in there this week to take a look. So I'm hoping that gets resolved soon. I'm happy that happened after my BFR.
Yeah.
I did have to in-op my cabin lights for my BFR because the fuse blew on that last time I scrapped it. I didn't fly. I was going to go get night current, and then the fuse popped on my cabin lights. So I had to. My mechanic was going to get in there for that. That wasn't much of a priority. He's a great guy, but like cabin lights. So I in-opped those for my day BFR, but then spotted a little drip, coming to around the where the new sump's screwed in. So.
Well,
hoping it's fixed soon because it's the only thing I like to do.
Let's go fly together sometime.
I'd love to. Yeah, let's do it.
I'll jump back. I haven't flown a GA airplane in a while.
So. Oh yeah,
yeah. My last airplane was a 210.
Oh so, I love 210. Yeah, I've never flown a 210. They're great.
It's a good airplane.
Yeah. My dream was a Caravan. My retirement plane would be I think we talked about this, like a Piper Meridian or a Malibu or something. Yeah, those are just incredible. Yeah.
I've had a Meridian M500, which same airplane.
Yeah.
They're good airplanes.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine just got a TBM that's ripping fast. That thing is I think it's the 900, but it's a cool airplane. Super fun. Anil, hey man, I think I've I've used a bunch of your time here today. I love talking aviation, and you're doing it right, man. And
thanks. Like I said before we started, anytime that I'm at a party and I find myself talking about aviation, I was like, did I do this? Like, should I just drop it? So I love the opportunity.
You're a pilot. How do you know? Yeah.
I'm like, was this me?
How do you know someone's a pilot? They're going to tell you they're a pilot. Well, hey, thank you for being a guest on the Flight Club podcast. And again, you're doing it right. I appreciate it. I'm a huge fan of your work, and can't wait to see you again. And let's go do some flying.
Thanks so much. Let's go flying. I love it. Yeah, let's do it. All right.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Flight Club podcast. Please subscribe to the show, leave a comment below, and follow us on Instagram at Flight Club Pod. We'll see you next time.